So welcome everyone to the Matrix, Conversations and Transformations. This is a seminar series from the Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice in Los Angeles that features innovative scholars, artists, activists, professionals. I'm Dr. Caroline Helbin, the chair of the Critical Theory and Social Justice Department, and I am joined by my fantastic co-organizers of the Matrix, Professors Malik Moazzam-Dolat and Mary Christinakis. And today we are honored to be joined by a panel of outstanding lawyers who have taken different paths with their law degrees. We're going to talk about what paths are available and how to get there. One quick housekeeping note, you can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will address them at the end of our conversation. And now I will pass the baton to my colleague, Dr. Moazzam-Dolat.
Hi, everyone. So we were joined, very pleased and honored to be joined by Kristin Brown. Kristin graduated from Oxy in 2008 with a Bachelor's of Arts in Politics. She received a Master's of Arts from Georgetown University in 2011 in International Law and Global Security. Her graduate research included international human rights law, cybercrime, and war crimes trials at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Following graduate school, Kristin moved to Belgrade, Serbia, and worked for a Balkan Investigation Reporting Network as an editor of their Transitional Justice website. In 2018, Kristin graduated from Georgetown University Law Center with a Juris Doctorate. In law school, she studied national security law, weapons of mass destruction, bioethics with an emphasis on disability rights, and space law. She also took several courses on the lack of meaningful regulation of developing technologies. During this coursework, Kristin wrote about probabilistic genotyping, commercial DNA collection, privacy law, and the Fourth Amendment. We're also joined by Kaitlin Kelly, who's an associate attorney at Riley and Waschuk. She received her BA in Religious Studies from Occidental College in 2012, and I had the pleasure of working with Kaitlin when she was here. Kaitlin moved from her home of Southern California to Seattle in 2012. She worked at a residential facility for children with severe behavioral needs as a lead behavioral specialist and a case manager for 3 years. This experience introduced Kaitlin to the dependency system and inspired her to go on to law school. Caitlin's internships in law school were focused on dependency law and criminal law. She received her degree from Lewis and Clark Law School in 2018 and was sworn into the Oregon bar on October 5th, 2018. And then we also have Sophie von Bergen, who's an associate in the litigation group at Stoll Byrne in PC in Portland, Oregon, where she focuses on complex litigation matters. She received her JD summa cum laude from Northwestern School of Law, Lewis and Clark College in 2020, and her BA in politics cum laude from Occidental in 2016. Prior to joining Stoll Byrne, Sophia was a judicial extern to the Honorable Magistrate Judge Stacey F. Beckerman at the U.S. District Court in Oregon. She received her JD summa cum laude from Northwestern Law School, Lewis and Clark. That's what we said. Okay, and that's that. So we welcome them and we look forward to talking to you and taking your questions. So
all right.
The first question.
Oh, I'm stepping on your toes already.
Okay.
Can you tell us about your path to law school and how and when you made the decision that this was the tool that you wanted to change the world? And we'll start with you, Kristin. How did you make this decision?
Honestly, my path has never been direct, and it's been largely informed by the people I've met along the way. And honestly, it started at Oxy, but I didn't know I wanted to be a lawyer until like partway through 2L. So when I was at Occidental, I took a course with Professor Chu on comparative revolutions, and I took a class with two professors that aren't there anymore, Boucher and Caldwell, on wars. And at the end of that experience, I realized I was kind of interested in conflict studies and war studies. And so I actually, after I graduated, went to Serbia then and stayed with my friend's grandma, a friend of mine from Oxy who's from Belgrade, and wrote about Serbian nationalism. And then I used the paper that I wrote, to apply to graduate school. And I ended up going to Georgetown because another friend of mine from Oxy, his father is a professor at Georgetown. And he told me, Kristin, if you're interested in war studies and conflict, you should really come here. And so I did. And when I got there, I was in the conflict resolution program. And I realized when I was in that program, my first semester, that it wasn't right for me because it felt a little bit too, it wasn't concrete enough. Like they talked a lot about important things that you need to, heal communities, truth and reconciliation commissions, for example, which I think are really valuable. But I was at the same time taking a course on international law and rules of warfare. And I realized that that was more my calling, to go with the law. It felt a little bit more concrete. And even though I sincerely believe that you need truth and reconciliation commissions, and one of the reasons why we see so much chaos here in America is because we've never really addressed in any formal way the wrongs that were committed against a multitude of peoples throughout the course of our history. I think it's valuable work. It's just that my calling felt a little bit more like I want to be a prosecutor. I'm an advocate. And while you're also I want to say, you're a mediator when you're doing CR, but you're also a mediator as a lawyer. It just felt a little bit more like I want to take these guys that commit human rights abuses to court. This is a really important part of the healing process, and it just fit more with me. So I switched to international law then when I was there. And after that, I just realized that, I kind of like the tools of the law for human rights abuses and holding people accountable, even though they are not universally applied ever or enforced. And there are several weaknesses with the law, but it just felt more like it was my calling. But when I started at Oxy, I wanted to be a screenwriter. So, and I still do, it's still going to happen. It's just, I'll get there later. So it's never been a direct path. And when I started Georgetown, I wanted to be like the host of The Daily Show. Still do, still plan to, but I'm doing this on the side for now. So
law on the side. I love it.
Oh, just on the side.
How about you, Sophie? What was your path to choosing law as a tool?
Yes, so I knew going into law school. Yes, I did when I was going into law school. But going into Oxy, I knew that I was really interested in law, just generally. I have family members who are lawyers, and I also thought it was like really intellectually interesting, and so it's changing and evolving. But I think working in the politics department with Professor Piscopo, researching on gender policies, that was really interesting to be looking at legislation and analyzing it. And I was maybe kind of like Kristin was saying, like I wanted to be a little bit more concrete, and I liked the idea of actually being involved in the law more directly, but then also taking Professor Gonzalez's rebellious lawyering course. She let me take it twice. I loved it so much, and doing the practical aspect, but also thinking of the theoretical and the framework to really use law in a rebellious way, which is working with clients in a more kind of collaborative way. And so that was a big, I guess, a big impetus behind pursuing the area of law that I'm in, which is civil litigation, mostly plaintiff as opposed to defense side.
Thank you, Sophie. How about you, Kaitlin? Your path?
Yeah. So I first want to distinguish, like, Sophie and Kristin are very like fancy types of lawyers. I am just like but I'm a juvenile public defender, essentially, to like take down all the stuff. So I am just in court all the time, defending either juveniles on criminal matters or parents and children in dependency cases, which is essentially kids in foster care. So my job is just like the pure public defense side. I never thought I would go to law school, was not interested in it. Didn't particularly like law school, but I really like what I do now. And that's all I wanted to do. Because I worked with kids in foster care for about 3 years that had severe behavioral issues after Oxy. And I basically chose between, am I going to be a social worker or like a defense lawyer? And I picked defense lawyer, very happy with that choice, really love doing it. But yeah, so I think law school, if you maybe are more, I call public defenders like charming dum-dums kind of in the legal way. We are good at talking to clients. We're good at being in court. We're good at thinking on our feet. But like the appellate brain legal analysis, we get a lot of help on that from like the appellate people who kind of tell us what arguments to preserve. So I think it's cool that we have such like a breadth of what everybody does, because it is all really different. So there's a lot of different paths you can go down with law.
That's great. Thank you. So we have a number of attendees who are interested in going to law school, and people are going to be logging on afterwards. We get a lot of questions about it. And most of our students are interested in the law school application process, the LSAT, and all of that. Can you tell us about your law school application process and then your law school experience as you went through? Let's see.
Okay,
Kristin,
hi.
why don't you start?
So I took, I used Blueprint LSAT prep course, which I loved. It was kind of expensive, so I admit that. Though they have more options now than they did when I took it. So way back when I did it, you had to physically go to UCLA and sit there 3 times a week. And I think the program was 3 months, but now you can do it online and just do it monthly. And so you kind of like pay as you go, or you do it as little or as much as you want to. And a recent friend of mine, I told her to try them and she loved it. And she just did it for like 2 months online instead of sitting in class. And it's much cheaper that way. I thought they broke down the test really, really well. And it is a test that you can learn as long as you practice. So whereas like the bar exam is memorizing a bunch of things and trying to throw everything out and then it leaves your brain, the LSAT is just a test of repetition. If you've practiced it enough, you'll be fine. And I actually liked the LSAT as far as standardized tests go. So I've never taken a standardized test I thought was fun, but there are elements of fun to the LSAT. You have, logical reasoning. So you're looking at logical fallacies of little arguments, and that's super fun because you memorize a list of commonly used fallacies. And then for the rest of your life, you see them 10 times a day. And so it's like a blessing and a curse because you can point out all these fallacies, but then you're like, oh, ignorance was bliss. Now I'm mad all the time. So definitely, memorize your list of fallacies and use them on your friends at home. Then you do the reading section, reading comprehension, and they give you, it's usually an academic article that's science-based or history. So it won't be history, it'll be like the history of the Peloponnesian War, which I know a bit about from Oxy. So that wasn't even totally random, but it'll be something random like that. And it'll be an academic article and they want to make sure you can read that. And it's not quite as easy as like an SAT reading comprehension. And then the third was games, which I don't understand the point. I didn't hate them once I learned how to do them. So when I first sat down for the LSAT and did a practice test, I had to leave all the games questions blank because I had no idea how to approach them. And if you've never looked at an LSAT, it's pretty much something like, there are, let's say Alfred, Bob, and Carl went to the store on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they had apples, oranges, and bananas. How many bananas were in the car on Thursday? And you're like, what, like, it just makes no sense. And so pretty much Blueprint taught me how to draw the games. If you draw the pictures correctly, you can answer all the questions. And that's why I kind of liked games, because it's harder to miss them once you know what you're doing. So I would encourage everyone, you have more tools now also. For LSAT prep than I did. We had like Kaitlin, and that's it, so you guys have the internet with free tools and resources. And I'd say give yourself enough time to prepare without overwhelming yourself if you're trying to do it while you're still in school. Just spread it out, do a little bit every night maybe, instead of concentrating on it all at once like I did in a shorter period of time. And also you now, unlike when I took the LSAT, you have it, I think 8 times a year. And I only had 3 times. So that's great. If you need to take it again, take it again. I say don't get wedded to one score. If you're not happy with it, do it again, guys. There's no shame. So I took it twice, got the same score, and was like, okay, this is my fate. And so I applied then, like, oh, well. So give it another shot. Try to finish the test. I'm a very slow reader. It's very hard for me to finish things, but I don't think the LSAT is a test that's pointless, totally pointless, like a lot of tests are. I mean, it is a little pointless. And many law schools are now taking the GRE as well. So I think Georgetown started after I was there, accepting the GRE if you prefer that test. I don't. I took that for grad school, did not like it. So whatever is your preference, whatever you're more comfortable with, the GRE might be a little easier, but we had math. I think they might have gotten rid of that. I had math on my GRE and it was like 8th grade algebra and I'm 25. I don't remember, awful. So that was the LSAT part. The application process I thought was pretty easy because LSAT makes it so that everything is in one place and you can apply to different schools all on one website. Is it still that way, guys? I'm like, okay, I loved that. I thought it was really easy. I personally did not apply early. Like all of the advice online says to apply early. I applied on the deadline and it was fine. So if you're nervous, you're getting anxious, you haven't applied yet, I'm just a procrastinator. I had no excuse and it was okay. So apply maybe early, but here was the downside of applying late. I had gotten into all of the other schools that I wanted to go to, but I really wanted to go to Georgetown and they had not looked at my application. Back then, at least you can see, can you still do that? See like when they open your application, and it was May. I'm like, so I had to turn down other schools and I told them that. I sent them an email like, you're my #1 choice. I really want to go here. I've turned down other schools. Please, can you look at my application? And they wrote me back that day, like, we're so sorry, we'll get to it. And I got in within a week. So I could see that they like opened it and then wrote me right back with a nice little handwritten letter they sent to my house with the package. Like, we're sorry it took so long. So I actually think it might have helped me that they had never gotten around to my application. So I forced them to pull it out and consider me individually. I'm not sure if I was in a mix in January with everybody else, if they would have sat and really thought about all that this has to offer you. I don't know. I truly don't know. But I did. It's so bizarre at school. They have admitted students weekend in January, those kids with their t-shirts and their mugs, and I hadn't even applied until March. So I'm sitting here like, you're going here, and I was so far behind. So don't get anxious if you haven't applied in January or the year before. You're still likely okay. Email the school like me if you need to. And one more bit of advice there, they offered me no money, so I emailed them and asked for it. Just ask. They have a ton of it. The worst they can do is say no. In this instance, they gave me some money. Then I asked for more, and then they said no. So you know what? It's fine. A little's more than nothing. So don't think because they didn't offer anything, you can't just email them. Hi guys, I'm awesome and amazing. Thanks for accepting me. Give me some money. So that's my advice to you there. As far as law school is concerned, I loved it. A lot of people hate it. A lot of my classmates hated it. I loved it because there were so many courses you could take that I looked at law school not as necessarily a vehicle to a job I knew I wanted to do. I looked at it as an opportunity to just learn as much information as I could about a bunch of different areas of the law. So I encourage everyone who is watching to go to Georgetown's course catalog, not because you need to go to that school, but because they have so many classes in areas of the law I never thought about, that you might be convinced you want to be an environmental lawyer, and then you see a course description that's talking about bioethics and bionics, like bionic arms and stuff. Yes, I took this class. It's interesting. So like you can leave like me with like space law, wow, the final frontier. And I went in with like a human rights, war crimes, genocide, that's what I want to do. And I left like, or I can work at a tech company doing privacy by design. Like you never know. There's so many classes. Just to prepare for this, I went and checked and clicked on public interest law, and 216 classes came up. So just take a look. You might see something. You don't have to go there, but it'll just give you an idea of what you can do with a law degree, what you can study in law school outside of the big gen ed courses like contracts and fed courts and evidence, but the weird niche areas of the law that I hadn't thought about until I went there. And I'm just trying to talk so fast. I loved it. If you guys want to go to that school or you just want to talk about the law school experience, email me because it makes me so happy. I loved law school. And oh, one thing I would say as far as advice, the dean told us that weekend that we started at orientation that the law, there's more than one way to define success. So you look at what your classmates are doing and you might think you need to be on the law journal or do moot court or add on all this extra stuff in order to be a successful attorney. For me, success was not crying myself to sleep at night, being well rested, and having fun with my best friend's small children who lived there. So if you're okay, you don't have to be Paris Geller, stressed, high strung all the time. Law school can be okay. A lot of my classmates were pretty stressed out. I like to look at it as a choice that they made. You can choose your own courses the last 2 years, and I chose fun courses and they chose to learn about stocks and bonds. And so yeah, they were a little bored. So yeah, the law can be anything you want it to be. Study, I encourage you, even if you know what you want to do, to take random classes and just see what you can learn. And yeah, that's it.
Wow, thank you so much. Kaitlin, How about your experience? Applications,
Yeah.
law school, all of it.
That's a good question. So as far as I would not recommend what I did, I would defer to Kristin on that. I was at my job, I was probably working about 50 to 60 hours a week. And I just like studied in my free time with like a book I got at Barnes and Noble. So honestly, I don't think I could tell you what the LSAT, what was on it. I've like completely pushed all that information out of my brain. If you gave me a logic game today, I would completely and utterly fail it. So I would go with Kristin's way of doing things because I was real fast and loose with the LSAT, and I kind of just accepted my score. I had a very specific like application. You know, I worked with this population of kids in care for 3 years, and that's all I wanted to do. So basically my application was like, I had good grades in undergrad. My LSAT was okay. Do you want to take me? And this is exactly what I'm going to do. And that's my interest. And I got in everywhere I wanted to. I picked Lewis and Clark's. I liked the campus very similarly to how I liked Oxy. And I thought I was already living in Seattle. Portland was a little cheaper. I intended to go back to California, but now I have a house here and I'm barred here, so I'm sticking here. But as far as the application, I think for me, I only wanted to do this specific thing. So I think that's really helpful. But obviously a lot of people that apply, that doesn't have to be you, right? I think there's a lot of good reasons to go to law school. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can say. And I also think Oxy prepares you, I think, very well to fill out these types of applications and to write compelling personal statements. I know Malik edited mine at least twice and was like, get rid of this, and like focus on this. And I had other friends from Oxy that really helped kind of shape what that looked like too. So as far as law school, I think I really loved Occidental and I felt like it was just exactly what I wanted from college. Law school, I felt like there is just a whole other layer of like privilege, and honestly, I would just say privilege that I had no concept about. And it is not like a social justice-y experience, at least my law school. So I think that is a thing to like keep in mind. I also think I worked with a population I wanted to get back to working with in a different capacity. So you don't really get any of that in law school, which makes sense because in hindsight, with my clients, if you're like in a removal hearing where the stakes are, your kids are going to be removed today, you're not going to say, do you want this law student to represent you? So there's like no ability to have any of that hands-on client experience, which I think for me made law school tough. But I did clinics later on that were really great. I got to do expungements. I got to do like sex offender registration relief stuff that kind of got me through to the next stage. So, you know, half the people I went with loved law school and loved practicing. And then half of us absolutely hated it and only loved practicing. So it's fine either way. Like you'll get through it and you'll either love it, or like me, you may hate it, but then it's only 3 years and then you get to be a lawyer, you know, presumably forever unless we do something bad.
I love hearing the different experiences. It's going to be so helpful to our students. How about you, Sophie?
Yeah, so as far as the application process goes, I tried doing a more self-study approach. It was not working out. If you can, what I did, and I recommend it if you have the resources to do it, I went with a tutor from Princeton Review, and Tim, he was just the greatest. He helped me with so much stuff. And it's funny mentioning the logic games. The only time I had a moment in law school where I actually thought, oh my gosh, logic games was when I was in my property class and we were talking about, like if so-and-so, you know, leaves their proper estate to this person, but if they have a party on it, then it goes to this person. And these ridiculous facts of people trying to control their relatives from the grave and figuring out, okay, wait, what happens if this condition? So again, I don't practice that area, so it doesn't go into my day to day. But so I recommend, if you have a hard time with that kind of stuff, just don't be afraid to work with someone. But anyway, Princeton review materials I thought were really good. You can get your hands on them. I worked on my personal statement for a while. I also took a year between undergrad and law school, because I knew that I didn't think I could really try to enjoy my last year of school and work on my comps and all of that, and then also have a good application. And so I also didn't apply early decision. I considered it because I had my eyes on some of the top, they call like the T14, the top schools. There was one school that I was really interested in going to and ended up on the wait list. And in hindsight, I'm really glad I didn't go there, not because it isn't a great school and there weren't great professors and people there, but I really liked my experience at Lewis and Clark. It's close to where I knew I wanted to be practicing in Portland. There are some, it was a great school on its own merits, even if some schools not ranked in the top, whatever, like those are obviously great schools, but it might not be a great experience for you personally. So I think it's good to think about what kind of environment you will thrive in. And like, I really liked the size of my cohort. I think, your first year, you are going to be probably taking some larger lecture classes, like the torts, con law, con law maybe in your second, but anyway, like contracts, torts, property, all of those kind of basic classes. Everyone has to take them. So it's usually a bigger class, but it's great if you're able to take seminars, which I loved. And it's interesting, Kaitlin and I went to the same law school. I feel like we had pretty different experiences even there. I liked it. There were some classes where property, some parts of it I liked, some of it I didn't. And that had nothing to do with that's just kind of the material. But of course, now I am in my practice, I'm working on an environmental law case and there's lots of property law involved. So it's funny how things come around, but I think it's important to come in with an open mind. And I thought I wanted to do employment law when I got there. And my advisor said, you should take intellectual property because that's an important aspect. So I did, and I loved that. And then I kind of got into more trademark stuff. And then I got into the business law and then business litigation. And so you have to be kind of willing to let the paths guide you. But yeah, as far as being at law school, I recommend you getting involved if you feel like you have the capacity to do it. I did law review, and I actually, maybe it's because I really like having rules to follow. I actually enjoyed it, and I've actually found it's been helpful when I'm working on site checking a brief or finding assertions that someone will say, okay, a partner will come to you and say, okay, I want to make this, and this argument, or I want to make this assertion, but they don't have a case off the top of your head and you have to go and find it. Like, it's good practice to be able to do that. But any opportunities you can to practice your research and writing is going to be super helpful. And I was able to do clinics, and also my first year after my first summer, I worked at the Northwest Workers Justice Project, which was a fantastic opportunity to actually work with people and look at and just kind of learn the law, not necessarily on the fly, but you have to be able to teach yourself, because in law school, there are lots of classes, but you don't even have the time to take every single type of law that you might end up practicing. So I think it's good to just have that foundation of knowing how to approach and how to research different areas and then learning to apply it. So I think that's a fun thing to do. But I think it's any opportunities you can to like practically do what you're learning. I think that's the best way to learn personally. And working with a judge was fantastic, because you're actually, besides the kind of inside baseball of how it works, when you're a litigator, it's all about, the judge is really your decision maker. So it's good to know how they think. But then also the mentorship was just invaluable. The judge I worked with is just a fantastic person and really involved in the community. And that was just a great experience. So I recommend, even if it seems scary and you think, I don't know if I'm smart enough or have the brain to do it, you should try it out. And you'd be surprised if you might end up enjoying something you hadn't even considered before.
Can I jump in really quickly? Something you said made me think about class size. So one of the reasons I loved Oxy was because we had small classes and I could have relationships with my professors. I knew I never wanted to go to a big school. I didn't even apply to like UCLA or USC. I wanted the small campus environment. Georgetown's the law center is big for a law school. It has about 2,000 students. So like the same number as undergrads at Oxy. So we're on a separate campus also from the main campus, which I really liked. I liked being away from main campus. But what I was going to say is, yeah, your cohort is huge. So your 1L year, you go through, everybody has to take the same courses, constitutional law and contracts, torts. And your cohort is, for us, it's 100 people and there are 5 different sections. And then there's, I don't know who the other people are, but part-timers, I guess. So there are 5 main sections. And then after that, the courses get much smaller. So if you're like me, I'm sitting here like, I have never seen 100 people in a classroom before. This isn't for me. It was fine. You can also talk to your professors and develop the relationships I have with the professors I had at Oxy because they love what they do. So they're always excited if someone cares. But then after my 1L year, my classes were usually from 10 people to like maybe 25. And at 25, it would be like complex litigation, a class that everybody wants to take. And then 10, it's something down here weird, like human genome editing, like no one cares about that. So if you do go to a bigger school and you're like me, who I like the small school environment, it's okay. At least at this school, I can't speak to the other ones. You will break down into smaller class sizes, which is what I prefer, honestly.
Excellent. I just wanted to remind everyone, we're in a small class. There's almost, right? So please ask any questions you have. You can see there's a great diversity of experiences and approaches and areas of law. So ask any question you have. And we have made them live so you can see them. So you can see like what other questions have been asked. But do ask any questions you have here. And we'll get to those in 1 second. But maybe what we can do is close with this question, and maybe we'll go in reverse order. We'll go like Kaitlin, Sophie, and Kristin, and then you can just jump in and talk to each other too, as you spark ideas amongst one another. But the question we have is, how can law be useful as a tool for social change, right? So oftentimes people think about law, you get sucked into corporate law in some way and lose track, but how can it be used as a tool for social change? And then what are the limitations of the law in seeking social change? So answers however you want. Maybe we'll start with Kaitlin.
Oh, that's such a good question. So I think what drew me to dependency to me is sort of and juvenile delinquency, juvenile criminal stuff is kind of a nexus of all of the systems that are subjugating people kind of come to a head. It's a lot of issues of addiction, issues of systemic racism, systemic trauma, just an incredible amount of people's issues, decades long of living in poverty. Most of my clients I would say about 80% of my clients were in foster care as children. And then they become parents whose kids are in the dependency system, hopefully, not for long. But I think that as far as social change, I think that being a public defender is like sometimes just a slog, and not in a bad way. I think that we have this idea that if you lose, or if you aren't constantly winning in a case, it wasn't worth anything. And I think that's really indulgent. Like, it is important. I only define my success as if a client says thank you to me, which obviously sometimes they won't, which is completely fine. But there's a lot of value in getting up and advocating for someone and saying exactly what they believe and their perspective on the situation, or getting up and frankly fighting like a losing battle. In dependency, the standard of proof is 51%. Typically, that's what the state has to prove. That is very easy for them to prove. And child welfare, also because it has to do with children, is just any evidence comes in, all of your client's life is laid completely bare in such an intimate, intrusive way. And it's your job, no matter what, to get up there and really go for it and advocate for them. And to me, like, that is why I love my job. It's why I love being a lawyer. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that. I also think on the delinquency side, as far as, so delinquencies like juvenile criminal, I think an example of how I kind of view it as social change is in Oregon, and in a lot of the country, the amount that they prosecute kids of color is so egregious, like every single time I get a new client, they're always a kid of color. And so on basically every case I've ever gotten, we have a way of filing an alternative disposition, which is basically they can take a plea, but if they do well on supervision and like follow the rules and don't get in trouble again, their whole case gets like ripped up. There's no plea, there's no evidence of the case. It never goes on their record. So I just do that on like every case I get for kids in delinquency. And I've gotten it, I would say about 80% of the time. And then about 80% of my kids have done well on supervision and are leaving with absolutely no record. And a really good way of that I bring to light that prosecutors hate is, bringing up race and the fact that prosecutors bring these kids in and say they're a danger to the community when it's only kids of color. And then once you bring up the insane racial inequities in charging those kids, they usually clutch their pearls and are super mad at you and say to the judge, that's ridiculous. But it's a good tool. And I also feel like that's just a way I like to do it, particularly for delinquencies. But in general, I think that's sort of how I view the law as social, what you can do to promote social change.
Thanks so much. Sophie, do you want to take a shot at this one?
Oh,
Sure. So when I think about it, I honestly think of more of the shortcomings of the law for social change than its ability to actually, I guess, pursue it. I think that's mainly because of how a lot of times you'll see an issue and you'll think, oh, there has to be some sort of a remedy or law to deal with this. And then you look at it and you realize like there are so many exceptions within it, or that's so specific, like which type of which person needs to bring it and the time limitations. And so I think it can be challenging to try to use existing laws to, within the system. I think it can be frustrating sometimes, but there are times when it's great and there is something on point, or you can find a way to make an argument that you can support with analogous cases, which I think is fun when there isn't something exactly on point, but you can kind of pull common threads from different areas and say, all right, well, maybe this is how we should be doing it. And I think that's fun to do. And I think also in terms of, you can look at different, I guess, areas of law and different ways to pursue social change. I think, for example, like this environmental law case I'm working on, it's kind of focusing on larger issues, and which is important. But I also think like the work Kaitlin's doing is obviously super, super important, because that's such a clear impact on someone's life. And it's just, you can just change someone's life entirely by helping someone out. So I think it's just like, it's whatever passion you have, I think it's really important to try to find your way into it. And it will be hard, I think, and it can be really traumatizing for people who have had experiences in trying to go through the legal process. For example, like immigration and asylum. I'm doing a pro bono case on that right now, and it's just, there's so many different pitfalls to this, how it is. And when you read it and learn about it, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's actually how our immigration system works here. And that's just a conversation for another day. So it is frustrating when you try to work within that system, but it can be rewarding when you are able to help your client meet their goals. And so there are opportunities, but it can be frustrating.
Thank you, Sophie. Kristin, want to take us out here?
Yes, I'm like, how much time? I'm so nervous. I'm gonna just talk and talk. So I'm trying
Great.
to zip through. I looked at this question as like a broader, a bit like in a bigger constitutional law kind of way. And so with that, I would say, I think that the law is it's necessary. It's usually a necessary tool for social change when we're talking about individual rights and equal protection. And sometimes it also requires obviously changing hearts and minds along the way, like with same-sex marriage or child labor laws. It's something that for some reason in law school, for the one day we talked about child labor laws, I was so horrified at how long it took for us to acknowledge that you can't work children to the bone, but it's capitalism, it's America, so whatever. Sometimes the law, it takes a little while to get there with the courts, but when that happens, it's awesome and everyone celebrates, and then you know, like the White House in a rainbow flag. Then you have the horrible realities of what are the challenges with the law, and it's that the law is whatever judges say it is. So one of the fun things you do with law school is look at like the doctrinal ambiguities in every area of the law. Nothing is concrete. Like the law is so ambiguous, and even in instances where you think it's quite clear, a judge can say, or is it? And so the biggest frustration is obviously, well, who's sitting on the court and also who writes the law. So in this week alone, you look at how there was a bipartisan panel set up to talk about police reform, and that just fell apart in Congress this week because they can't agree on anything. And even that wasn't particularly sweeping in what they were trying to agree to. It was, you know, to me, common sense regulations, and we can't even get there because of the structure of our government. And then with the judges, let me just rage. My constitutional law professor was appointed by Barack Obama. I was going to call him Barack like we're friends, so I added the surname by Mr. Obama in 2010 to sit on the 6th Circuit or 7th Circuit, I think. And Mitch held it up for 6 years until Trump filled the seat. And so she had the pleasure of teaching me constitutional law because she wasn't sitting on the 7th Circuit, but I don't think that's a fair trade-off. And so it's not, guys, it's not. So holding up that many seats on the lower courts made a huge impact to what we're about to see in the next, I don't know, forever, the rest of my lived experiences. And so it's really frustrating because the law is interpreted by judges, and judges are people, and people are horrible sometimes. And the good news is that if you go to law school, you can work within the system and try to fix things. So, which I don't mean that dismissive, like in a dismissive way at all. I actually think the really cool thing about law school is, one, you learn about constitutional law in a way that I hadn't before I'd gone there. Just even understanding how laws are written, it's much more than like a Schoolhouse Rock thing. And so it's really helpful to go to law school just to understand the system that you will inevitably work in. Even if you don't do anything that relates directly to constitutional law, everything comes back to constitutional law. And so if you take a job like you were talking about immigration, I signed up for We the Action. So if you guys are just curious, We the Action emails, they always ask lawyers to do pro bono work, and they have lists of jobs they'd like you to do, how long they think it'll take you to do it, a couple hours, like 5 hours, 6 hours. And there's a ton of volunteers needed right now for helping Afghans and Haitians who want to come here. And so I'm encouraging the law students watching, or future law students, just to go on the website and see what the need is, just so you can know what your law degree can do. And so even if you're doing something else full-time, you can take a pro bono case and really help individuals. So I feel like the progress gets made at an individual level much more quickly than in the bigger systemic changes we need to see. So if we don't have a bill for police reform, then maybe having a really good defense attorney will help somebody who's been indicted. So you just have to kind of figure out where you fit in. And trust me, there's a way that you can actually do something meaningful, even in a system that is largely corrupt, you know, and this is coming from a child whose mother was a prosecutor. So like I have spent my whole life with my mom as a prosecutor, but she was she did mostly sexual assault cases. And so she's a really good advocate for men and women who have been victims of sexual assault. And so it's just what you can do on an individual level to help people.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kristin. Let's jump into and get to as many questions as we possibly can. We're going to combine the first two questions and we'll just go in the same order. So Kaitlin, two-part question. One, what would you recommend in terms of timing for the LSAT while folks are in college, right after college, a year out? And the second would be, would you take time off again, or would you recommend that between undergrad and law school?
I would personally strongly recommend it. You know, again, that's my advice. I think going into law school, you have to have a good sense of identity, or I think it helps a lot, because there are going to be a lot of people who are running around talking about how they're studying for 16 hours a day and who all of their sort of sense of self is external based on accomplishments or getting a certain grade on a test or all of those things. I wouldn't find that to be very pleasant. Other people might. So I don't think I would have continued going through with it if I had gone right from undergrad. I just don't think I would have. I think I had a sense of self. I think I knew who I was. And I think it frankly just made it a lot easier to know what my priorities were in law school and to make friends or, you know, have experiences that I thought were meaningful without people being able to sort of influence me too much. I also think, I just think there's something really valuable in being a working adult after undergrad. There are a lot of skills you develop that I think it's easier to do when you're not in like a super intense other academic environment. So I would say, yes, I took 3 years off. So I would say like, 2 years I started studying for the LSAT and like applying. And I felt like that was a good amount. You go longer. All of my friends also that I'm friends with from law school took at least 2 to 4 years off, is sort of who I became and maintained friendships with. But, you know, either it's up to you. Really, that's just what I would say.
Great. Thank you, Kaitlin. How about you, Sophie?
Yeah, so I took a year. I highly recommend it if you can. I know it's whatever you can do, but I probably started studying in earnest for the LSAT a couple months before I actually took the exam, and that was focused studying. I would recommend, even if you don't necessarily sign up with maybe a certain test prep, but whatever, you know, company, you could even ask them like, what is the recommended course of study, and then get an idea. I don't recommend trying to study for it for a year. You're going to burn yourself out. I think just try to do a focused plan and have it scheduled how long you're going to do it. I think so. And also give yourself a little bit of time to not stress about it. I probably stressed about it too much my senior year of college, thinking about, oh, I have to take the LSAT, I have to take the LSAT, and just dreading it. And that's not a way to live, I've learned. So, and definitely, I think having your identity is important. And that was something my first day of law school, or I don't know if Kaitlin had Professor Bashaw for contracts, but one thing she did was like the first day we had a little note card and we talked about things that we were like proud of ourselves for doing and things that were really central to our identity. And having that is something that you could look back on when you're in the depths of trying to learn like the UCC 2207 disaster that is, you know, sales of goods and all of these different. So, because it's so easy to get sucked into the day-to-day and getting hyper-focused that it's, you can lose sight of your identity. And I also think it's important beyond that, and it kind of ties through, is ending up somewhere. I mean, I've really lucked out. I love where I work. Solburn's a fantastic place. There's great attorneys, and there are people who also think it's important to have your own identity and really value having a life that's not just being legal all the time. So I think that's kind of a common thing to think about from applying to law school through going through and then your job after is making sure to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Thank you, Sophie. Kristin, advice for when folks should take the LSAT and when they should go to law school.
So I took the LSAT as a adult, like at 27 or 8, I think. So I was well out of undergrad. And I actually deferred law school for a year after I got in. So my brain was sitting here like, what year did I take the LSAT? I don't even remember. So like I took it, I think when I was 27. Anyway, so I would advise, I actually, all three of us said the same thing. A little bit of life experience doesn't hurt. I would say the vast majority of the students there went straight from undergrad, but I felt like they had terrible perspective on life. So I really sincerely believe you should go live your life, do something else, and then come back to law school, take a little breather. But if you don't want to, or you definitely know this is what you want to do right now, I agree about 3 months is a good amount of focused study. If you can't do that, then yes, stretch it out a bit. But I gave it 3 months of like good old college try. And I think that was enough to really understand the test. But yeah, also do things at your own time. So if you're feeling stressed out and overwhelmed in undergrad while studying for the LSAT, maybe don't take it right now. It'll be fine. Law school isn't going anywhere. It'll be there later. And I also think if you have a little life experience, it makes you a more interesting applicant. So for a lot of the people applying straight out of undergrad, I have no idea what their essays were about. But if you have even taken a year or 2 to do something else, or even travel, as elitist as that sounds, like do something so you have something to talk about. And I also just think that I always say adults, but they were, like 30 something, 40 somethings that were in my law program just they weren't as high strung. I think when you are out of undergrad, you kind of have a perspective about what a blessing it is that your job is academia. Like you're going to school, that's your job. What a gift. Now, obviously, if you're also working full time and going to school, not as much fun. My really, really good friend from grad school was at State Department and also doing this. And I'm like, I don't know how she slept. But if you have the privilege of going to law school full time, it is a gift, guys. You should love it. It is school. I felt like I had a better perspective and I was overall happier because I had a little lived experience before going into law school. But absolutely go if you know you want to do it. Don't let me discourage you from going now. So
makes me really happy that all three of you have said that, because I didn't start my PhD until I was like 28, right? So life experience is important too. It's an education. There's a question from one of the students, and it gets at sort of the nitty gritty of how does it all work? Do you specify what kind of law you want to do as you're applying to law school, or does your degree say a specific specialization? How do you designate or declare a designation with your law degree? And I'll just, how about Kristin start us off?
Okay. So it's all pretty gen ed at my school. I think it's probably that way now. When my mom went to law school way back, like 30 years ago, they had to specify a track. And I think they only had 3 at the time when she went, like business, criminal, and then something else kind of generic. But she loved the fact that I could do what I want, because she had to like decide right then what kind of law to focus on. So I'm pretty sure now that there are law schools that have specializations where they are known for a certain thing, or they have programs that are, like I'm going to use USC, for example, because I applied there and they have a lot of entertainment law courses. And the professor I talked to, I told him I was interested in human rights law. And he's like, maybe don't come here. You're going to have to like build your own program. And then you go to Georgetown and they have like 50 classes on human rights law. So you can pick a law school that has an area of specialty. You can focus all of your study on that or not. Generally what I do when I'm applying to jobs is I talk about the classes I took that are relevant to that job, but my whole field of study wasn't just on one thing. So again, I did go to grad school to study a specific type of law, and you can do that with an LLM or like a master's degree. So you can study, for me, it was international law and global security. They have like military law specializations or whatever you want. So if you want to go to do more school, you can get an LLM or an MA, but otherwise it's pretty much a general ed thing. And you can just pick what you want to do and then tell jobs that you've studied these things in law school, or get an internship in an area that you're interested in.
Great. Kaitlin, Sophie.
Oh, sorry, I
is
was
that
all
similar?
ready to go, but okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
at
yeah.
Lewis and Clark, they think it's the #1 environmental law program in the country. So I didn't go for environmental law. I took an environmental law class that I really loved. But it's, so I mean, to answer the question really specifically, you don't have to declare a specialty. You can get a certificate in a certain area. I was one tax course credit away from having a certificate in business law. I decided it's kind of like when I was in college, I was a politics major. I was a couple credits away from being a UEP minor. I decided against it, not because I didn't love the UEP department, but because there were other classes that I really wanted to take. And I was like, this is my only opportunity. I might as well just enjoy it. So I don't think you should get too wedded to doing a certificate in something. Again, even if you don't take a certain class in law school, doesn't mean you can't practice that type of law. So I think it's just important to try different things and not be too concerned. I mean, there might be some like tax, you need to be more specialized, I think, but other areas, it's not necessarily a requirement.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, there are certificates you can get, but basically you have to take, everyone at every law school basically takes the first year of classes that are the same. And then there's a couple you have to take per your law school. And then it's really up to you. So I didn't have any. And also like at Lewis and Clark, they don't have anything really for dependency or juvenile. So I took close-ish classes. I took a lot of criminal classes. I took family law classes and like how to do like divorce mediation, which is actually helpful in my job now, but like there wasn't anything. So I just learned it all really from like being in court and my bosses. So yeah, it's not really the same as, you don't get necessarily a certificate or anything like that, at least at Lewis and Clark.
So you could take courses that are adjacent, and really what it teaches you to do is think about the law in particular ways, right?
Yes, or they have a lot of like, it's called Indian law still, but it's like Native American law, and that's a big portion of like dependency. So I took a lot of things that were adjacent to that. So you can kind of hone in, but a lot of jobs in law are like, you'll have to learn, you know, the specifics of it once you're doing it.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're out of time. Students, I hope that was as valuable as we think it is. And you recognize the value of the amazing advice you got from this incredible panel of Oxy alums.
Amazing.
And it's so great to see you all. And some of you, Kaitlin, I haven't seen in many years, and it's wonderful to see you again and hear that you're doing so well. So thanks to everybody. We'll be back again next Thursday. This episode, in case you want to share it, the attendees will be up on our YouTube channel and on our website. And thank you again for joining us. You're all wonderful.
Yeah, amazing panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.